Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel and the Coach Bob Shipley. We're going to try to grade a 45-38 overtime win for Texas over Mississippi State. Coach, that's kind of where I'm at. I don't know what this is going to look like. We're still trying to figure out what exactly we watched, but we're going to give it our best shot. And we'll start with quarterbacks. Arch Manning. If you didn't watch the game and you just looked at the box score, you think Arch dominated from start to finish, 29 for 46, 346 yards, 3 touchdowns, did have an interception, ran for a touchdown. But we know most of that was in the second half. Great second half for Arch until he got hurt. Then Matthew Caldwell comes in, throws a touchdown on his lone pass attempt of the night. CJ, I'll start with you. Kind of same deal for Arch. He's got to fight through not much of a run game, offensive line issues. Passing game was hit or miss, but it adds up to a win, and Matthew Caldwell might be what elevates this grade.
Yeah, he definitely lifts the tide there, but I thought Arch played well. I did. I thought even in the first half, he was sitting there, about 12 of 19 for 99 yards, and you're sitting there saying, man, Texas offensively only 14 points. Didn't work necessarily all too hard for those 14 points, right? One of them was essentially the result of a 60-yard play, and the other was a turnover on downs deep in Mississippi State territory. But I thought he played well. There were multiple drops in there. I thought he gave you a chance, and in the fourth quarter, he elevated his play to a level that we've rarely seen from him this year. And look, I think Texas figured something out with that. And I think for Arch, and Jeff, we talked about it a little bit last night after the game, you got to go quick with Arch. You got to make him feel like he's in up tempo. In Texas was at its best and has been at its best late against Florida, late against Ohio State, obviously late Saturday evening against Mississippi State. When they're trailing and have to go quick, Arch doesn't think, and he plays his best football exactly in that situation. So I like an A- for the quarterbacks after last night.
Coach, to CJ's point, I know the scramble drill isn't much of a plan. You can't have that as your offense, but Arch does really well with it. The receivers seem to do well with it. And Rod Babers calls it when you're in panic mode, you're in desperation mode. That's when this offense seems to be at its best. I don't know how you bottle that or plan for it, Coach, but what do you give the quarterback position a grade for this one?
It's a B- for me, and only a B-. And it wasn't a bad performance. We had receivers dropping balls. WeGo stats are crazy deceptive. It's not like, they were underthrown or overthrown. They were right to him, and he dropped them. But then Matthew Caldwell coming in and saving the day, that helps the quarterback grades. But, my grade for Arch through 2.5 quarters, maybe a little bit more, is totally different than the last quarter. Or last quarter and a quarter, maybe, because, that last quarter, Arch was who we thought he was. I mean, he was throwing dimes. He was the man, until he went down with, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't heard the report today to see what it is, but I would assume a concussion. But he was money when it mattered. And so I'd give the quarterbacks a B.
That's where I was coming in, Coach. A solid B, because it was rough up until the fourth quarter when they got rolling. It was rough. Arch in the fourth quarter, 12 for 20, 169 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Coach, I want you to speak on this because CJ and I talked about this in the quick recap after the game. I think everybody appreciates what Matthew Caldwell did, but for you to come in cold off the bench in overtime in that situation, and actually, CJ, I'll start with you. Caldwell said after the game he checked to that was an audible. Man, that is you can't ask much more of your backup quarterback than to deliver in a spot like that.
No, and just setting the scene a little bit. It was an RPO. He tagged a fade route from Emmett Mosley into the corner of the end zone. Ball was there. Catch was phenomenal. 7 points Texas. It ends up being the game-deciding play. But for him to come in and immediately just check to it, I don't know what more you could ask for from your backup quarterback. It didn't feel like the moment was too big for him in Gainesville. And obviously, last night, that was spectacular.
Coach, what say you about Caldwell?
Yeah, Caldwell is a very welcome addition to our team. And, who knows what he can do in a full game? I don't have any idea. But the times that he's come in the last couple of weeks or 3 weeks, whatever it's been, he's been money, So I would give him an A for coming in off the bench cold, doing what he did. Arch is probably a C+ for me, but the fourth quarter moved it into a B. Caldwell didn't move it into an A for me, but it's still a B for me. But thank goodness for that kid.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
No doubt. Saved everybody's bacon on Saturday. CJ, I'll start with you with the running backs. They finish with 68 yards on 21 carries between them. It's hard for me to grade the running backs because Texas never really got in a rhythm running the football, and quite frankly, at times never tried to get in a rhythm running the football. What's your grade for the running back, CJ?
Yeah, it's tough. I feel like I'm in an impossible position to grade them because, again, it's what happens in front of them that really yields the grade, right? In the performance. And they didn't fumble. I thought Trey Wisner was putting hats on hats in pass protection. He gives all of his effort. And he looked good last night, and to have Baxter back, I thought that there was some positive moments. Texas only had one rush, however, that was north of 10 yards. You didn't have much success. And anytime it felt like Texas found something, it was immediately resulted in a loss of yards or an incompletion or the drive then turned over. Whatever it was, there was no real snowball effect of getting the run going. And I guess a C+. They, again, we talked about it, Jeff. They're there, and that's really the most I can kind of describe their performance as, and that's unfortunate to them.
Yeah, Coach, I was CJ said C+. I was going to go with a C. I don't know where you're at, but I thought CJ put it well there. The running backs they ended up just being kind of there.
Yeah, I agree. I would bump it to a C+ for me because of the pass protection. They picked up some big-time blitzes down, when the game was on the line, and that was huge. But the difficult thing for the running backs is, unless you're just a freak athlete, you're as good as your offensive line. And I just didn't feel like our offensive line gave our running backs much of a chance tonight. So, yeah, a C+ for me. But again, it's really hard to dock those kids down that low when the offensive line was not creating holes for them, and running lanes. So a C+ for me for the running backs. When it came down to it, down the stretch, they were clutch in picking up blitzes and helping with protection. So might even be a B- when you add that in and consider how the game came out because of their protection.
Yeah.
But I'd say a C+ to a B- for me.
Okay, that's I'll stick with the C. I'll go back and I'll bump my grade to quarterbacks to a B+. The more I think about it, just Coach, you mentioned the offensive line. We'll get to them in a second. Just Arch was under a lot of fire again on Saturday, and I thought just hung in there tough, took some shots. I don't think anybody should doubt that kid's toughness or his physical maturity at this point. Coach, I'll start with you. Let's go to the receivers, and we'll do receivers and tight ends together just as a receiver group. Contributions from, you got contributions from dang near everybody. DeAndre Moore, 6 catches. Wingo goes 5 for 184. 2 touchdowns for Emmett Mosley. 2 touchdowns for Parker Livingston. Coach, what's your grade for the receivers?
It's a B, almost a B- for me, simply because you drop balls you should have been able to catch. Had we caught 3 more passes, probably it'd be an A.
Yeah.
But when you drop passes that are with no pressure around you, you're wide open and you drop passes, it's hard to bump the grade up for that, but again, this is such a crazy, it was such a crazy night last night. I mean, the receivers came in clutch time and time again, but then they would let us down time and time again. So it's really hard to give them a real stable grade for me. But because of the outcome of the game and the incredible effort by Emmett Mosley, I'd give him a B. But those drop passes, man, Wingo stats they're deceptive.
Mm-hmm.
He had some really big plays. The first play of the game for us offensively was huge. But you take that first play away, our first half was pretty much just like inert.
Mm-hmm. It was pretty rough. To your point, Coach, Wingo does finish 5 for 184. That was on 12 targets, 129 of that after the catch, and he was charged in the official box score with 3 drops. CJ, what's your grade for the wide receivers, or for the receivers as a whole, tight ends, wide receivers included?
Yeah, I'll give it like a B minus. It was just very, very barely kind of clipping that B grade for me. But I thought, to your point, Coach, I mean, it had the ability if you haul in a number of those catches. And look, I know that's a tough play for Parker Livingston, but if you talk to him after the game, I'm sure he would have told you that's a ball that he needs to bring in, the ball that ends up getting intercepted and brought back into Texas territory. But that's why I sat there and said, Arch is kind of throwing the ball pretty well. The balls are hitting hands. And that's a welcome sight. He had some misses there, but for the receivers in general, you get in tight ends, you go for 330 plus yards, and what about 165 of them after the catch? I mean, that's big. That's the playmaking that Texas hasn't had consistently this year. And at some point in the fourth quarter, when it was Emmett Mosley making plays, DeAndre Moore was making plays, you see Ryan Wingo and Parker Livingston all with big catches. I'm sitting there saying, this is what it was supposed to look like. It's taken them a little while, but the 4-man rotation that coming into the year was expected, it's finally clicking. And that was a welcome sight for me. The other thing is, look, I thought Texas blocked much better on the perimeter at wide receiver tonight than just about any other game of the year. First play of the game, obviously, it had Xavier Worthy versus Oklahoma vibes, and Xavier Worthy probably scores that one. But point being, they blocked much better on the outside, and that's again very welcome.
Yeah, I'm going to go with the B plus just for 2 plays that really stand out. Parker Livingston's touchdown catch in the second half, where he made a great effort to drag the toe, and then Coach, that Emmett Mosley touchdown. Caldwell puts it where, hey, it's either going to be incomplete or my guy's going to make a play, which is where you want to put that fade ball. But Mosley, that was I think we call that really good body control right there, Coach, to look it in, get the toe down, and finish the catch.
Yeah, it really was. It was incredible effort on his part. And, that call, you could probably justify that call going either way. I mean, that was as close as you could possibly get in my mind. But, we just got to level out the inconsistencies. The drops, we can't have that. I mean, this guy's wanting to go to the NFL next year and wanting to be a, high draft pick. Not when you're dropping passes, Thankfully, we still have some season left.
Yep.
You got to separate a little bit better for Wingo as well. He's getting locked a little bit.
Yeah, to your point, Coach, the high with his offense, period. The highs are really, really high, but the lows are still way, way too low. Let's go to the offensive line. CJ, I'll start with you. We've talked about the numbers in general. Mississippi State finishes this game with 5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. What's your grade for the offensive line in this one?
Boy, it's probably a D plus. I thought that again for another game, you can't run the ball to save your life. There are 7 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. You were constantly under pressure. It felt like, and it's just much more of the same. I will say you're going to see Connor Stroh at left guard moving forward. He provided at least some sort of protection in the passing game that was not there until Texas went full time into that mode late in the game. That comeback is not possible without Connor Stroh. And I know that the vision still needs improvement. I know his lateral footwork still needs improvement, but at least there was a smidge more of time in that fourth quarter than what you saw at any point previously. I thought Texas, when DJ Campbell went down, I thought you could probably just packed up this game and gone home. But credit to them, they found a way. A D plus maybe is a little harsh, but look, it's just much more of the same, and I don't see it getting much better moving forward.
Coach, we were on the watch with us together when DJ Campbell went down, and it felt about as bad as it could feel at that point. They're on the winning side, Coach. Well, what's your grade for the offensive line?
Well, it's I would say a D. A D. When you rush for 72 yards, you give up 5 sacks. And how many tackles for loss, CJ?
12.
Yeah. 12 tackles. Yeah. That's not a passing grade. I'm sorry. You give up 5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss. You have 72 yards rushing. Your quarterback's getting the heck beat out of them all night. I mean, if there's an obvious spotlight on a group that has to improve for us to have a chance to get in the playoffs, it's that group.
Yeah.
But I don't know how I don't know how you improve. I mean, they are who they are. They proved it week after week after week after week. And you can't keep having D's and F's on your offensive line and expect to have a successful football season. You just can't do it. So it's a D for me.
Coach, I'll stick with you as we go to the offense overall. And in the realm of the offensive line, one of my frustrations watching the game was even when the backs would have positive things, Sark was really reluctant and quite frankly didn't just go back to the run or stick with it to try to establish it. Coach, the only thing I can come up with at this point is I just don't think Sark trusts the offensive line unless you get into in-game situations where you have no choice but to trust them in pass protection. Because to CJ's point, at least when Arch is able to scramble, at least they can hold up long enough to let him get out of the pocket. But I think it's just boiling down to Coach Sark just doesn't trust that offensive line right now.
No, he does not. He doesn't. But you have to understand, there's no way a head coach is going to come out and put down this offensive line. He's not going to do that. But if it's obvious to us, it's obvious to him and his staff what we have with that offensive line. And they are, I would say, a below average Power 4 offensive line. I don't even think they're average Power 4. I think they're below average in the Power 4. And, we've got to do what we can do to make plays and win games like we've done the last 2 weeks. It's not pretty. We're winning, but you've got to somehow get through this season with enough momentum to be able to go out and get some studs in the portal when the season's over.
Yeah. Coach, what's your grade for the offense overall for this one? I know it's all over the place.
C.
So.
Yeah, it's a C. I mean, and as you guys know, from first quarter through most of the third quarter, it's probably a D. But from the end of the third quarter to the fourth quarter, it was an A. So I come out with a C for those guys. I mean, just so inconsistent. It's a roller coaster. I mean, we were texting during the game. How do you grade this game? It's crazy. It's one of the most. It's a really strange game to look at, and in terms of trying to put explanation to it and grades to it, I don't know how you do it. We won the game. We looked horrible at times. We looked unbelievable at times. Unfortunately, we looked horrible more times than we looked unbelievable. We won the game against a team that had the longest losing streak in the SEC. So, woohoo, we beat them. But for me, it's a C. I mean, it's very average performance for a Power 4 football team, in my opinion.
Yeah, if I'm giving the offensive line a D, I think mine averages out somewhere probably around a C plus or B minus. B minus is probably what I'll go with. CJ, to Coach's point, this sounds like maybe, and we all probably had one of these classes in college where you kind of didn't take it too serious and you realize you're up against it, but then you ace the final and somehow you end up with a B.
That's a great analogy. That is a great analogy. You described my college academic career to a T.
Coach was looking for those classes that didn't have the attendance policy attached to it.
That's right.
CJ, what's your grade for the offense?
Yeah, I wish I could split this up into 3 quarters plus fourth in the overtime, but you can't. It's probably a C minus because of how quickly, that fourth quarter it brings it out of the depths of hell for me. But think about it. Your first 13 possessions, you had 14 points.
It's not great.
In those 13 possessions, you only had 3 with plays or that saw 5 plays or more. You did nothing. You had 5 3-and-outs plus a turnover, right? It was dismal, man, in the first 3 quarters, and then something clicked, and I can only point to having time in the pocket, just that little bit more that allowed Arch to find guys down the field. I don't know if play calls changed. I don't know. Look, Milby was in the booth for the first time this year. I don't know if anything changed there, but something that I can point to was Connor Stroh coming in and giving Arch Manning just that little bit more time. It's probably a C overall, C- overall.
Yeah, the fact that we're in the C to anywhere from a C to a B minus, with as bad as that first part was, it just shows you how impressive that end surge was to get it. Because if you just Coach, if you just looked at the box score from this, like you didn't watch the game, you just handed the stat sheet to somebody. But man, Texas had a really good day offensively. It's like, no, to CJ's point, they really did most of that in about 3 or 4 possessions at the end of the game. So it makes the end look really remarkable when you tie it all together.
Yeah, it really does. That's a really good point because, as we've mentioned, it's really hard to grade the game yesterday because it's just there were so many ebbs and flows, highs and lows. You're like, oh gosh. I mean, we were doing the second quarter live, Jeff, and live stream, and I'm just like, I mean, what do you say? What can you say? And then an hour later, I'm like, whoa! Yes. It's just a roller coaster. It really is. And it's frustrating for our fans. I'm sure it's frustrating for the team, but hey, we live to see another day.
Texas fans, you've been through a couple of these seasons, 2007, 2020. I mean, there's been some seasons where you won some games. It wasn't masterpieces, and sometimes it gave you indigestion, but you got there, and that's kind of where this team is right now. Let's thank our wonderful sponsor for this edition of On Texas Football. Sponsoring our grades each and every Sunday is Allegiant Digital Marketing. Thanks to Chad Markham and his company. Did you know that among the top 9 challenges business owners face, the most difficult ones include finding customers, increasing brand awareness, digital advertising, and lead generation? What if I could point you to a local, homegrown agency here in Austin that can solve all of those problems for your business once and for all? For over 25 years, Allegiant Digital Marketing founder and CEO Chad Markham, he's a UT grad and instructor of the Digital Marketing Boot Camp at UT Austin, has helped thousands of businesses overcome these challenges. Take advantage of their Hook 'em Horn special and save up to $2,500 in advertising. Visit AllegiantDigital.com/ontexasfootball to learn more today. All right, we'll go to the defense. And CJ, I'll start with you. Let's go to the defensive line. We're doing interior line and edge together. What's your grade for this group, CJ?
Very much like the offensive line. I wish I could kind of spin this into first 3 quarters and then whatever I saw in the fourth quarter and overtime, but it probably evens out to about a C-. There was plenty of time for Shapen to throw the football towards the first 3 quarters of this game. Texas didn't really get any pressure at all until they started bringing pressure, in which it was like, hey, you've got guys. Like, use them, right? It took forever before I thought Texas really started to bring in Anthony Hill, who had 2.5 sacks. Colin Simmons didn't have a sack or anything, a tackle for loss or anything, but he had a forced fumble. He was a guy that was in the backfield creating havoc. And look, I know you finished with 7 sacks, 9 tackles for loss. That's great. But Mississippi State still moved the ball pretty well. Shapen still beat you pretty well. C+, B- for me, like right on the fringe.
Yeah, I was thinking probably B- when you add it up. Coach, one thing that stood out to me during the game, Texas got caught up a couple of times, and I think it was one time was in that second quarter you and I were watching. They just got caught up in tempo situations, and they couldn't sub, and you got a tired defensive line. But it really seemed like they were able to win on first down on those last few drives and really set the tone. To CJ's point, PK started bringing more pressure. So when you add it all up at the end of the day, Coach, what's your grade for the defensive line?
You made some really good points. Both of you guys did. I feel like let's not forget the big stops we had. We had some huge stops. 4th down, 3rd down, short, huge stops. But other times we were not very effective. I thought overall the defensive line, the edge guys, when you put it all together, were, they had some low points, they had some higher points. So to me, it was just overall pretty average, which is a C for me.
Yeah, I will say this, CJ, I'm gonna get your thoughts on this because Coach and I talked about this during the second quarter. Hero Canoe has just flat out exceeded everything I thought he would bring to the table out of the portal. I felt Alex January's presence. Colin Simmons made some plays down the stretch. Obviously, Ethan Burke had the walk-off sack. But, CJ, when I think about the defensive line in this game, even when things were going bad, Hero Canoe was still around the ball making plays.
Yeah, he definitely was a pleasant surprise. And to your point, I didn't expect this from him. I thought even coming in with this portal class, I've mentioned it before, I thought he was maybe going to be your third, fourth guy out of the five. And he's a guy that's played more snaps than anybody. And he was felt probably more than anybody on the defensive line tonight by Blake Shapen and that Mississippi State offensive line. He was fantastic.
Coach, I subscribe to the Will Muschamp theory. You don't train a thoroughbred to run backwards. And goodness, when PK started sending Anthony Hill at the line of scrimmage, really good things happened in the fourth quarter and overtime. Again, some really good, some not so good. Coach, what's your grade for the linebackers in this one?
Yeah, again, we had some really good plays and we had some bad plays, and you average those out. To me, it's kind of like the defensive line. They had linebackers had some really good plays, but they had some others that weren't pretty. We gave up 445 yards offense, so to me, it's a C for the linebackers.
CJ, what say you for the linebackers?
Yeah, C for me. And I know statistically, like you mentioned for Ryan Wingo, it's probably going to look like that for Anthony Hill with the sacks and the tackles for loss. But I thought the vision for the linebackers in the passing game was really poor. Mississippi State basically got whatever they wanted over the middle of the field. On top of that, if you take away the net loss on sacks, they ran for 140 yards. They had success, and it just wasn't a great day for the linebackers in general. Normally, I feel Ty Anthony Smith. I didn't feel him today.
Yeah,
probably a C minus for me.
Yeah, if I'm going B minus for the defensive line, I'll go with a solid C for the linebackers. To your point, CJ, it would be disrespectful to call them kind of empty calorie stats, but man, when this gets submitted to the league office, Anthony Hill might be SEC Defensive Player of the Week. I haven't looked to see what everybody else has done in the league this week, but Anthony Hill finishes this game with 10 tackles, 6 solos, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 4 hurries, and a forced fumble. So it looks awesome, even though if you watched it again, there was some up, some down. But I just love what PK did with him in the fourth quarter, getting him toward the line of scrimmage. Coach, I'll start with you with the secondary. I think when we talk about the defense, at least during the watch with us and some of the feedback we've gotten on the website and even what we've talked about as a staff, some of the soft coverage almost came back to bite Texas in the end. PK started making some adjustments in the second half. But overall, Coach, what's your grade for the secondary?
I really feel like I haven't rewatched the game. Obviously, I always need a day to digest it. I'll watch it tonight, but they had a lot of receivers running open. I mean, guys that there wasn't anybody on them. No. Some of that you have to give Levy credit for scheming, those plays. But overall, for me, for the secondary, there were some great plays. There were some not so great plays. I'm kind of between a B minus and a C plus for the secondary, probably a B minus because, hey, those guys were out there, 48 plays the first half. I mean, it was a long game for those guys, for everybody on the defense. It was a long, long game. But, I feel like we had some guys that came up and made some plays at times. I just have to go back and look at the film and see how much stuff was schemed and how much stuff was coverage breakdowns. But for me, probably a C plus for the secondary.
Yeah, Coach, to your point, I thought they were good, really good at times against the run, especially Jelani McDonald and Jalen Gilbo. Both those guys made a couple of really big plays on some of those fourth quarter stops. CJ, you had the bird's eye view from the press box. What do you think of the secondary, and what's your grade for that group?
Yeah, maybe I'm kind of on the opposite side. Maybe I need to go back and watch tape to understand if they were actually playing where they needed to play, whatever. But you allow, what, 380 yards passing? You know, it felt like Blake Shapen had 280 yards. It didn't feel like it. He actually did it. He had 280 yards on 11 explosive plays through the air. You know, Texas was getting diced, I thought. And it was everybody. You know, I thought they had it over the middle of the field. I thought they were picking on Jalen Gilbo. We saw Brendan Thompson, a guy who went against Manny Muhammad every single day for a year, just torch him off the line of scrimmage for a go-route touchdown. I thought the secondary was the worst part of the Texas defense today. It kind of gave me 2023 Washington vibes, you know, and Texas was playing Michael Penix, you know, NFL first rounder, and they were playing Blake Shapen, you know, and that's not what you want to be seeing. You know, I'm looking at it now. You know, Blake Shapen, before, you know, Texas really stepped up and got pressure in the final part of that game, he finished completing, what is this? I'm looking at now, 12 of his last 13 passes, 2 touchdowns in there. I mean, I thought it was Swiss cheese in the secondary. I thought Texas desperately missed Michael Taft. You just didn't have an answer. The most answer you had, basically, was what you mentioned, Jeff, was Jelani McDonald running upfield, making plays by the line of scrimmage, but you missed a lot of tackles on the perimeter. It was a very poor performance for me. I'm giving it like a D.
Yeah, I'll probably.
Well, you know, you're right. They gave up almost 400 yards passing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go with a C just because I'll grade them on a curve, because this was a really tough offense to figure out, especially when you get in tempo situations without Michael Taft. So it was a really, really big challenge. You won the game, but obviously a lot to fix. CJ, I'll go back to you. Defense overall, your grade for this one.
You allow 38 points. It's the most since Oklahoma State in 2022. I made sure to go look that back up in the middle of the fourth quarter. It's probably a D. You allow 38 points. You have, I believe it was over 500 total yards before you factor in sacks and tackles for loss. It was a very poor performance by the Texas defense until you got to the fourth quarter. And that's when you saw your stars make plays for the first time all evening. So it's probably, what, C minus, like a very loose C minus for me.
Yeah, Coach, mine's probably averages out to somewhere around a C or a C plus, in that C range, we'll call it. What's your grade for the defense overall, Coach?
Yeah, my grade for the defense overall is a C. I think you give up over 450 yards offense, and yeah, did we miss Michael Taft? If there's any doubt or question of what he means to our football team, we saw it tonight. You know, we just didn't look like we were totally in sync the way that we have been. And we've had some not great defensive games, but defense has really not been the problem, you know, with this football team so far in this season. You take an All-American player out, who's your quarterback back there, and it makes a difference. So it's a C for me for the defense. It would be lower than that had we not, you know, you factor out the fourth quarter, you know, and overtime, and, you know, but overall to me, it's a C for the defense. We had some bright spots, but we had, you know, you can't give up that many yards.
Only 2 pass
that many
breakups.
Points.
Yeah.
2 pass breakups, and Jelani was that close. He was that close. I'll give him that to that fourth down goal line stand once again. I just that you see that play complete, you're like, it's one of these days.
Guys, if this was a school grade, if this Jeff Lebby gave the Texas special teams some extra credit, because why you kept punting the ball to Ryan Niblett, I have no idea, but I'm thankful they did, because it made the difference in the game. Coach, I'll start with you. Your grade for the Texas special teams.
Special teams to me was an A minus. You know, and we know why it's an A. It's pretty obvious. That pretty much won the game for us, you know, got us into overtime. But I felt like there were a couple of punts that we probably could have fielded that we didn't, that cost us, you know, field position. The block field goal was good. you missed basically an extra point, 27, 29-yard field goal. So, it makes it tough, to give them, it's like everything else. The offense, defense, they're roller coasters. Special teams the same way. But because special teams probably won us this game, blocking the field goal and returning, the kick return for a touchdown, it's A- for me.
CJ, I'm with Coach. I was thinking an A-. You house a 79-yard punt return. That's good as far as I'm concerned. Jack Bowmeister, for what it's worth, CJ averages 44.8 yards per punt on 8 punts. What's your grade for the special teams?
Yeah, an A- was where I was going. Maybe a B+ lifted up by Niblett's return. Look, Ethan Burke, I believe that's his 3rd blocked field goal in his career. Maybe it's his 4th, but that's a huge play. You miss a guinea, like you said, Coach. The big thing for me, and I love seeing this from Jeff Banks, is they're daring opponents to return kickoffs. Just straight up daring. Hey, we're going to kick it to you on the 7-yard line. Take it wherever you want. And teams go nowhere with it. They had 2 returns on Saturday night. Mississippi State did. They went for 15 and 16 yards. Texas backed them up into about the 18-yard line for 2 straight possessions there. And finally, Lady's like, hey, we're done with this. Give me the ball at 25. Fair catch everything. And it started to really, irk some of the Mississippi State fans. There were some boo birds out there after that. But that's what you got to do. And that's the little things in special teams that I really enjoy seeing. Thought today was also going to be a day in which we saw a fake punt. Didn't see it on the other side. Maybe they're saving it for later. But probably an A- for me.
All right. Let's put this one to bed. Coach Shipley, I'll start with you. Final thoughts.
Well, I think I feel very fortunate we were able to come out of Starkville with the win tonight. But it does show hope. It shows grit, determination, fight in this football team. But you've got to, there's two sides of the perspective. One is a Mississippi State team who could have beat Tennessee and should have. And, their conference losses have been close, but at the same time, you've got a Mississippi State team who has the longest active losing streak in SEC play. And you have to go to overtime to beat them, so that's troubling. But, it's like me when I go play golf. I'll hit 1 or 2 shots around that will go, yes, I'm going to keep playing. I got this, and we watch our football team and it's just a roller coaster, but when it came down to the nut cutting, as they say, the Longhorns came up big on defense and they came up big on offense. And so those are the things I hope we can build on. This team does have some grit. They've got some character. They've got guys on this team that desperately want to win. But I have to say this, I can't wait till Michael Taft comes back. I don't know when that's going to be, but don't think that guy doesn't make a difference. He makes a big difference. And to me, if Michael Taft is playing, this game doesn't go to overtime.
Some good takes there, Coach. Great points. CJ, you slugged it out in Starkville. You were in the press box. You got the hot button question for Sark in the press conference, and you triggered one Brandon Walker with your take on the Wi-Fi and the cell service in Starkville. So you get the last word for this one.
I did get to speak with Brandon. We kind of bonded a little bit. Maybe we talked about some Chick-fil-A nuggets in Starkville, Mississippi. So maybe there's some common ground there. But point being, Texas escaped. The most improbable escape, it's like leaving Alcatraz. They survived all the alligators. They swam back to shore, or I guess that's sharks, right? It's on the Pacific coast, but they survived is basically how I can say it. It's like Houdini leaving, after getting drowned for 5 minutes in front of everybody. They found a way to live to see another day, and that's really the only way I can put it. It was, synonymous with miraculous for me. Because there was no way that I thought Texas was winning that game, and somehow, some way, they love to see another day.
Yeah, I'll end this with a tweet from my good friend Chris Hummer over at CBS Sports that entering today, FBS teams had lost 429 straight games when trailing by at least 17 points with 10 minutes remaining in the fourth quarter, per CBS's research team. Texas just broke that streak, scoring 24 straight in a 45-38 overtime win over Mississippi State. I don't know how they did it. And quite frankly, gentlemen, at this point, I don't really care. Texas is 6-2, and getting ready to play Vanderbilt, coming back home with somehow, some way, everything that they wanted still on the table. So we'll see how it goes.
Hey, first game at DKR since September.
Goodness.
And that, Coach, I would expect that crowd to be rowdy with a ranked, really good Vanderbilt team come to town. It should be electric at DKR. At least I hope it is. Coach Shipley, CJ, thank you both for the knowledge and expertise. Thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. Thank you to Chad Markham and Allegiant Digital Marketing for sponsoring it. If you're not a member, over at ontexasfootball.com, you can get over to the site right now and sign up using the promo code OTFOG, and that'll get you 1 year of access for $39.95. Make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whether it's here on the channel or on the site, you're not missing any of our coverage before, during, and after every Texas game this season. For CJ, for Coach, for Matthew, for the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, hook 'em.